Доброго вечора, дорогі друзі. Трошки пізніше. Надзвичайно приємно, що ви тут з нами. Мене звати Дарія Слободяник, я редакторка відділу культури українського Vogue. І сьогодні матиму задоволення годину провести з вами, з Джудіт Турман. Джудіт – культова американська журналістка, письменниця, яка понад 30 років створює історії про моду і про культуру, про мистецтво для журналу «Нью-Йоркер». І, власне, як писати про культуру – це тема нашої сьогоднішньої розмови. Спробуємо поговорити про те, як зробити ці історії по-справжньому привабливими та цікавими для світу. Власне, будемо говорити англійською мовою, поговоримо годину. Після того, якщо у вас є запитання, прошу ставити їх Джудіт, тому що це, як на мене, прекрасна можливість. Dear Judith, sorry.
No.
Sorry for this speech.
Добрий день.
Wow, it's beautiful.
It's one of my four words in Ukraine.
It's beautiful. It's really a big pleasure to welcome you in Ukraine. And I just wanted to thank you for being here with us in such difficult times. It's really important.
I feel honored to be here. I feel that I'm very moved by your struggle, the country, the people, the energy here. I feel it's my honor, not.
So my first question is rather simple. Why is it important for you to be here and to see everything that is happening in your own eyes? And what does this experience give to you as a writer?
That's a big question. Well, it is more than ever important. I was here last September. This was before the election in the United States. Now it's not. And so the idea of a country fighting, holding nothing back, fighting for its freedom, its cultural freedom, its autonomy, the rule of law, the respect for civil rights, for human rights. This has never been more important. And it's not happening in many places where it needs to happen, including at the moment where I live. And so this is a you're defending yourselves, but you're defending so much else. You're defending so much. You're setting an example. You're the courage of Ukrainians from every walk of life is setting an example, and that was very moving to me. And I, being willing to sacrifice. When I was here last September, it was a Sunday. It was the first day of orientation for the incoming class at the university. And all these beautiful kids. My son is 36, but I remember when he was 18. These beautiful kids, many of them in Ukrainian dress, and they're waiting for this. They're going to it's going to be lectures. And then the army band played the national anthem. And I burst into tears, which I'm going to try not to do now, because the feeling of solidarity, that this atomized Western world, material world that we all live in. And here was this example of solidarity, of people not thinking about themselves, of people thinking as a community. So that's Ukraine for me. I mean, there are lots of, I know that this isn't, I don't mean that that's only Ukraine. Of course, there's crime, there's jerks, there's all kinds of other things going on. But that's really what it is for me.
I'm sure you have noticed that our cities are full of culture now in Ukraine. I don't know, the cinemas are open, the theaters are open, the bookstores are opening every day. We have musical or literature festivals. So clearly for Ukrainians, culture now is very important. And you are the person who writes about culture the whole life. So I would love to know, how does it work? Why culture become such source of support during the time of crisis for humanity?
That's a great question. One thing that you're fighting for is your language, right? It's been one of the main principal sources of oppression is the imposition of a foreign language. And the struggle with many Ukrainians whose first language is Russian. But this is such a basic aspect of identity. So, and what interests me as a cultural, I guess I could say, language is really my subject, whatever I'm writing about in some ways. Fashion, the language of fashion. I'm not interested in, telling people how to shop or what to wear. it's a language, it's a cultural language, it's a form of expression. So I see that here. I went to a wonderful little tiny art show in Maidan the other night, in a tiny little room filled with beautiful young people, and the artist was from Dagestan. And yes, it's asserting yourself. It's standing up to. It's finding ways to express the soul and the pain and the fear and the defiance that you're all living through.
As I understand, you're working here on a series of essays about Ukrainian women. Tell me if I'm not right.
No, I'm not doing that yet. I'm thinking about, this is my second visit, and I was here.
So what's the aim of your visit?
The aim is I want to write something about Ukraine, and I don't know what yet. It takes me a long time to find subjects, because once you find a subject, I write very slowly. It's torture for me to write, even though I've done it my whole life, and it's a very long life now. And so I want to pick a subject that I know I can stick with and that's meaningful. And so it takes a little bit more time. And I have a disability. I don't speak Ukrainian. So in other places in Europe where I do speak the language, it's different. But I will find one. I will definitely find one. I'm interested in women artists. That's what I've done for most of my career. That probably will be a subject. It's definitely a possible subject.
Don't you think to learn Ukrainian?
You know, I speak five languges, and
Yes,
when I was
I
young,
know, yeah.
when I was young, I would go somewhere and I'd learn 200 words of the language in a week, and I'd get it. Your brain is less plastic at a certain point, so I forget. I learn 10 words and then I forget 7 of them. So I'm going to go on Duolingo. I'm going to see how that goes. I will. I'm going to try.
Wonderful.
It's also the alphabet. You know, you have to learn a new alphabet.
You know, today for us Ukrainians, it's very important to have some sort of conversation with the world, because the world should know that about Ukraine, not only because of the world. So how should we tell the stories about Ukraine now, about our culture, about our heritage, about our contemporary art?
Well, you're doing it. I mean, this very beautiful...
Thank you.
It's very beautiful, published by Ukrainian Vogue, contemporary Ukrainian prose and poetry and art, beautiful illustrations.
I mean, not only media, not only journalists, but just people.
Yeah, you know, people are afraid to come here. I understand that's, you know, you can't, it's not, it takes a long time to get here. It's a very kind of daunting journey. So, you know, under normal circumstances, people would be able to come and see firsthand, see what, when you look at the pictures in the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, the bombs are falling, and then the next morning you go out into the streets of Kyiv and it's this beautiful...
You experienced the awful night just yesterday,
yes,
and then you have the day.
Yes, you go out and it's a beautiful day. You have breakfast and you go out. The sun is out and the cars are in the streets and the people are pushing their baby carriages and they're sitting at cafes. So it's because newspapers report violence and tragedy. You get a very skewed picture of how much daily life, of how much normal life is also going on.
You know, I would love to change our topic a little bit and to talk about more about your texts, about culture, and of course about fashion. That is a huge and very important topic. But the first question in this blog will be very simple. How did you start writing? I mean, can writing be consciously chosen as a profession, or just came to you as a creative impulse?
No, you know, my mother was in English. She taught English and Latin, and I think she always wanted me to be a writer. Now, that could be a recipe for disaster. Your mother wants you to be something. But it turned out that, luckily, that her fantasy coincided with a certain natural talent that I had. And in a way, it was, I knew that I wanted to be a writer or a journalist from a very young age. And at first, I was a poet. My first things I wrote were poetry, and then I had to support myself, so I started writing essays and doing journalism. And it was the 70s, and so it was really the ascendancy of feminism in the United States and elsewhere. So I wrote a lot of feminist profiles and wrote a lot about women writers who nobody had heard of in various other languages, and that's how I sort of started. And then, you know, I've tried to, I can't make things up, so I could never write fiction. And for me, writing poetry, which I loved to do when I was young, it's a relationship to time and to timelessness that you lose when you're earning a living and you have a baby and you know, I didn't have that sense of the boundlessness of time that I needed to write poetry. So I became a journalist, and I was, and then actually before I became a journalist, I was a biographer. So based on the things that I was writing, a young editor commissioned a biography of the Danish writer Karen Blixen, Isak Dinesen, and I spent 7 years writing that, and it was a huge success against all odds. The book was a huge success, so it made my name, and then I went to the editor of the New Yorker and I said, I'd like to write for you, and he said, great. So that was kind of easy.
Yeah, regarding the New Yorker, it's truly that your name is connected, is associated with this media. What is this story? How did you get to this company? Was it just a passion, I don't know, or it was a dream for you?
It's a dream.
It's a
for
good
every
story. I
young
know
writer.
that's a good
it's
story.
It's a dream
Yeah,
for absolutely every young American is to write for the New Yorker.
Oh.
It's universal. So, because it's very, it means that you're really good at what you do. And it means that even if you're not that good at what you do, people think you are. And so, yeah, but I have a family story, it happens to be, which is that my grandfather, my Hungarian grandfather, was a baker. And he worked, when he came here, he came to New York in the late 1880s. And he worked as a baker in a famous bakery, the Vienna Model Bakery. The owners of the bakery were a German family, the Fleischmanns, and the son of the old man, who was my grandfather's boss, Ralph Fleischmann, became the publisher of the New Yorker, which was founded 100 years ago exactly, in 1925. And my grandfather, the old Mr. Fleischmann said to my grandfather, "You teach Raoul you teach him how this all works. He doesn't know anything. He's just spoiled." So the family had a relationship with the New Yorker that was based on my grandfather's friendship with Ralph Fleischmann. And my grandfather was a working class Jewish baker, and Ralph Fleischmann was a prep school boy, rich, elegant. So it was unlikely. But when my mother was hired as a summer receptionist in college, when she was a college student, or maybe even her last year in high school. So she sat at the front desk of this hallowed institution in the beginning. She was like probably the early 30s. And so that it was passed into family law, the New Yorker was.
I think it's a good story for a script, for a cinema.
I've written about it in the introduction to my first book of essays, New Yorker essays. I tell this story in a sort of shorter version.
Yes, it's beautiful, very beautiful. Let's talk about the text. What does it mean to write a good text?
It's a big question. Well, one thing about writing for the New Yorker, there's a standard of perfectionism that's brutal. You have an editor who's like your tutor at Oxford or Cambridge, and you work with that same person on almost everything. They send you back, even though I'm good at what I do, I've been doing it
Even
for a
now,
long
you
time.
mean, even now?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Nothing is accepted as it's handed in. Zero.
Even if you are Judít Turmán,
They
yeah?
send you, no, doesn't matter. They send you back, it doesn't matter anybody. I mean,
It's cool, yeah.
Joan Didion, Janet Malcolm, doesn't matter. They send you back for revision after revision. And sometimes they're very sly. They'll give you a first draft. Oh, it only needs a little bit here and there. So you do what they say. You think you've got off easy. And then you turn it into, oh, well, you know, it needs a little bit. Let's move some things around and see how it works. You don't want to hear move things around. Because then suddenly the structure falls apart and you have to
of course.
fill in the blanks. You have to rebuild the bridges. You have to rebuild the transitions.
Of course.
And this goes on usually for a couple of weeks until you're exhausted. And they always want to cut the lines you love the most. And sometimes they're right. And sometimes you have to fight for, you know, the husband of one of my editors said, he worked with the New Yorker too, he's a famous writer. He said about his wife, always throw in 10% extra so she can think she's cutting it. And I did.
I wanted to know who has been the most fascinating person you write about during your career? It's difficult yet to choose, but
there are. I'm trying to think of.
I'm asking because I would love to ask you, how do you choose the protagonists, the subject, the topics? How we should choose the good topic, the good character protagonist for text?
These are great questions. So it's a combination of, sometimes the writer will want very badly to do a story. And if there's what's called a hook, if there's something current that's happening with that person or the place or something like that, then you have a hook. Sometimes the magazine, there are story meetings probably every week, and writers get invited to some of them. So there's a long list of ideas. Ideas meetings is what they're called. And so you can go through the ideas list and see if there's something, if you need a subject, see if there's something you want to write. And that's usually how it happens. And so let me think. I mean, there's been so many great subjects. What's the hardest? Who was the hardest subject? Well, they fall into different categories. For example, Rachel Cusk, the English novelist, who's a fascinating character. And with Rachel, it was the opposite of what usually happens. The minute I met her, she started confiding in me and telling me all kinds of really deeply personal things. And every once in a while, I'd have to say, you know, this is on the record, you haven't called it off the record. And so she would just go on and on. That also happened with the Italian performance artist, Vanessa Beecroft. And she also, Vanessa was, it's not that she was the greatest subject in terms of being the most interesting person, but she was the greatest subject in some ways for being the craziest.
We made a cover with Vanessa a few years ago for our art issue.
Yeah. So, and she was fascinating. And so there's also, you have to find your Jungian archetype in relationship to the subject. At this age, I'm usually a mother figure, but you know, when I was younger, it was different. It was, and I think both Vanessa and Rachel, you know, who had problems with their mothers, saw me as the good mother, which is dangerous.
And what about fashion designers? Who was the most
hard? So the hardest, definitely, hands down, Rei Kawakubo, the designer of Comme des Garçons. And I love her work.
Yeah, I know.
I just love the spirit of it. So Rei doesn't talk. There's a big problem right away. And her husband, who's much younger and is British. Is he British or is he Australian? I don't know. He's one of those things. He is her voice. He speaks for her. We got along really well.
So and they're doing an interview together?
He was the interpreter. She doesn't. Ray pretends not to understand any English at all, but she does. But she won't speak any English. So Adrian was sort of the interpreter, but eventually. And I interviewed, I was in Japan, I interviewed all the people who worked for her. Eventually she said to me, I'm glad you don't ask stupid questions. I mean, this was through her husband. Like, where do my ideas come from? I was terrified to ask almost anything. And then, she said a few things that I could quote, which was good. I couldn't go up to her apartment, but I wandered around the cemetery nearby and the Ashoka cemetery. And I went to Berlin with Adrian to a pop-up store. But that was very hard. When your subject will not really collaborate. And those were the two extremes, Vanessa and Rachel, who were all gung-ho, and Ray, who wouldn't say a word. Now, in terms of other fashion people, there's two problems with fashion people. They're visual artists, and they speak in complete cliches.
Oh.
Right?
Brilliant, yeah. It's a pity.
Total cliches. Because that's not their language. So they're not sensitive to the cliches are ugly. They're just like, they're like a badly made jacket, or the seams are rolled, or misbuttoned. They don't hear it. So, and they spout a sort of PR thing. Some of them are very, very intelligent. For example, that's not true of all of them, but sometimes. Alexander McQueen, I interviewed him and Stella McCartney for the New Yorker Festival. That same pugnacious quality that he was in the work, that was in the shows, he was so tough. I admired it. It was great. He said, I can't do that accent. Why are you asking me these intellectual questions? I'm just a bloke, you know. So,
Yeah.
but I revere his work. I was writing about Balenciaga, and I spoke to Givenchy, who was still alive.
Yes.
He was chivalry itself, just chivalry itself. I never interviewed Saint Laurent, but I went to his last show.
Yeah. And you made a brilliant text.
That was one of the earliest
that is
things I did
one
for
of
the
most
New Yorker.
famous of your texts. Yeah.
And let me think. Isabel and Ruben Toledo, the Toledos who are, she's one of the most, and she died tragically at 50 of cancer about 15 years ago. She was one of the most underappreciated. She was the designer's designer. She was sort of a secret resource of the fashion world. And she never made a lot of money. And they sort of didn't care. And her husband is still alive. I just saw him not that long ago. So here's another dirty secret about covering fashion. So they send you to the shows. You go to Paris and you stay at a big hotel and
Yes.
you have the car and you do all this stuff. It's the high school cafeteria. It's high school. It's, well, you can't sit there. And the mean girls and the gossip and the backbiting and people trying to do things that sabotage you.
Yes.
And I wasn't used to that. I worked for the New Yorker and I just wasn't used to it at all. And that's how it is.
Wonderful stories. Thank you for this. I would love to ask you about audience. In Ukraine, writing about fashion or culture means to be interesting only to limited audience.
Right.
You're writing for New Yorker. It's the media that have a huge readership. So how do you write about culture in a way that is interesting to a broad audience? What is the way of storytelling for?
Well, that was my brief at the New Yorker. When David Remnick, who was an old friend, was a friend before he became my boss, and I had taken some time out to write a biography of Colette, the French writer.
Yes.
And then when that was done, I went back and David was the editor, and I said, I want to write for you. Great. He said, what do you want to write about? I said, oh, books. He said, no, we have a dozen people who write about books. What else? And I said, well, I'd like to write about fashion. And he looked, I said, but not like that. Fashion is an incredibly important part of the culture. And that's how I want to write about the social history. I want to write about fashion as a universal phenomenon, a universal language. Everybody gets dressed in the morning if they can get out of bed. So he said, okay. And that's sort of what I've tried to do.
So for you, fashion is a way to talk to a huge audience, yeah?
It's a way to talk to, it's sensual, it's expressive, it's aesthetic. Sometimes it's unconscious, sometimes it's predatory or demeaning, sometimes it's idealistic. It's kind of unlimited, the amount of, like the alphabet has 26 letters, well, yours probably has more or less, but with those letters, you can make almost any kind of meaning, and it's true of fashion.
Unfortunately, in Ukraine, writing about fashion doesn't regard it as a serious journalism. So what about
no, it's the same
your
thing.
experience? Because you told me
it's the
before.
same thing. So when I told my friends I was going to write for the New Yorker, they said, oh, great, what are you going to write about? I said, fashion. Really?
So it was a disappointment, yeah.
Frivolous? You're going to write about fashion? And one of the obnoxious friends said, you're going to write about Prada? I got a lot of that. And I don't care.
Why we should take fashion seriously?
Why should we take fashion seriously?
Yeah. Or we shouldn't?
Well, it depends. If we take seriously something that pretty much, not everybody in the world, but pretty much everybody in the developed or developing world has a stake in, that's a huge industry that pollutes the planet, that creates jobs, that destroys jobs, that economically, fashion is a very important engine of
course,
the
definitely.
economy. It's related to self-worth in a psychological way, that especially for women, that's a big subject. How to feel like yourself. I think one of the things I've always been interested in is in figuring out what to wear myself is what makes me feel most like myself. And then just trying to unpack what that even means, because there's not one person, we're all many people. So, and I think the idea of a wardrobe, strangely, reflects the sense that I'm sure you all have, that inside of your head there's lots of voices and lots of characters, and some of them, without having to be psychotic, you know, to have like the many faces of Eve, they're just not all the same. They're very different. So I think clothing gives you a tool, a prop for experimenting with the aspects of your identity. That's interesting.
One more question on fashion. One of your most famous texts on fashion is a piece of Saint Laurent, which is called Swan Song, yeah, which was published in New Yorker maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah, 25.
25. So, and at the heart of this text is a story of your first Saint Laurent piece, the skirt.
The skirt.
That you bought in London in
1968.
Read this.
69.
I read this story in your interview, and it's brilliant. So I would love to ask you to tell this story to our audience, and then I have a few questions about this skirt.
Okay, so I was let's say 60. I was 22 maybe, and I was living in London, and I had a room in a house in Barnes, which is it's sort of a suburb on the far side of the river, and I was working for the Poetry Society, and I was also tutoring the son, in a very posh part of London, Berkeley Square, the son of the producer of the Bond films, Harry Saltzman, whose son was a wild little teenager, and I would go every week and give him lessons. And they lived in, as I say, in Berkeley Square. And I had no money, and I would fill up on the cakes that they would serve at tea. I'd stick them in my pockets and stuff. And I was leaving, and I was walking home. They just paid me. I was earning 15 pounds a week, which then was about $25, maybe not even. And it was my rent for a week's rent. It was my room was $100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Walking home, I was walking down Bond Street, which is right next to Berkeley Square, and I passed the Saint Laurent boutique, which had just been opened. It was the ready-to-wear boutique, and I had to sort of dress up for my lessons. And I went inside, and I was greeted by, I think, Lady Rendlesham, who ran this unbelievably posh English woman, long hair like this, and accent cut class. And there was a sale on. That's why I dared to go in. It said sale. So I looked at the stuff in the back, and there was a skirt. I was plump then. People don't believe it. I was plump. And it was this brown skirt, this beautiful, thick sort of alpaca, lined with black silk, a midi skirt with zippers on both sides. And for some reason, one of the zippers was broken or something.
Oh.
It was reduced to 15 pounds, the exact amount of money I had in my pocket. And as I say, it was my rent. So I bought the skirt. And that was my first, and for a very long time, only piece of Yves Saint Laurent.
I'm curious, do you still have this skirt in your wardrobe?
I wish, if only I had that skirt. I've moved so many times. I wonder what happened to it. How could I have given it away? I don't know. No. And I've looked for it. I do most of my shopping, thrift shopping or resale. I don't buy things in stores. It's ridiculous. And I've looked for it online for years. Vintage Saint Laurent. I've never seen it.
What was the most fascinating wardrobe you write about?
The most fascinating
Wardrobe.
Yeah,
you write about.
Boost?
Yeah.
Tina Turner. And I didn't do that for the New Yorker. I was writing for Architectural Digest, and I went to visit Tina Turner in the south of France.
Wow.
And you know who she is, the great singer, Tina Turner. And we became friends, and she was enjoying it, and she said, "Do you want my closet tour?"
Oh.
I said,
Definitely.
"Are you joking?" And so she took me into her closet. Closets occupied rooms. And the strangest thing was that they were it was the most tasteful, low-key wardrobe you had ever seen. There were evening things and there was beading, but it wasn't Tina Turner, the stage costume. She said, those are my costumes, these are my clothes. There was tons of Armani, there was tons of, it was not conservative because it had a lot of energy to it, but it was pretty much all beige. So, you know, again, it's about being a good journalist is not being stuck on your expectations, I'd say too. It's like coming to something, you have expectations, but keeping them in check.
What can things in our wardrobes tell about us? What stories do they carry on?
Our clothes?
Yes. Our wardrobes, our clothes, yeah.
Well, for example, you are wearing a beautifully tailored black jacket, quite conservative, with a button-down shirt and whatever you could wear to a board meeting. And you're wearing a kind of serpentine, snake-like necklace, which reads as an erotic statement.
Yes.
And then you have these fabulous sort of disco trousers with the boa trim, which speaks to a wild girl's side.
It's beautifully, yeah.
And so it's called the semiotics of what you're wearing. It's a lot of mixed messages, but I think the essence of chic is in a way mixing messages. So I think, I mean, it would be boring if you had on, you know, a little string of pearls and a black pants.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That was what I'm thinking about today. Yeah, you know, definitely.
That's funny. No, it's and I just sort of, I kind of do it automatically. I kind of read people to see, and I can be completely wrong. It's not that I'm, you know, infallible, but it's an interesting thing to read people on the subway, to think, well, what were they thinking when they put that on? Or, yes, or, oh, well, that's really interesting. That's what the kids at the art show in Maidan, I was reading them. They were fabulous. They had tattoos and they had weird hair and they had, you know, really great imaginative, I imagine, young Ukrainian designers off the radar or who sell their stuff out of a basement, really imaginative clothes. And they were artists, you know, it was an art crowd. So yes. That was fun reading.
What are 3 most expensive, but not literally expensive things in your wardrobe now?
Things that I bought or things that I was given or whatever?
Whatever. It can be a gift, yeah, some special gift.
That's a good question. I have, for my 70th birthday, 70, which was 8 years ago, I walk a lot, and I was walking up Madison Avenue, and there in the window of Prada, there was a dress that spoke to me. And it was a black dress, sort of sheer, with a long button down the front, and the placket where the button thing was knitted in strange colors, and it had this beautiful, it was sort of chiffon, and it just flowed in a beautiful way. I was 70 years old. I walked into the store. I went up to the 3rd floor. I asked to try on the dress. They said it needs to be taken in. I said, fine. They got the seamstress. We took the dress to the cash register. I handed my card. That's way up there as expensive things. I'm not going to count jewelry, you know, family jewelry and stuff like that. That's one. That may be the most expensive thing in my wardrobe, because I bought it at the Prada store. I didn't buy it online. I didn't get it in resale.
And two more.
Well, one is a ring that I'm not wearing today, but it belonged to a beloved friend who died 2 years ago, tragically. And it had been given to her by her husband, whom I knew very well, for their 25th anniversary. And she has a daughter who she loves and whom she left various things to. But I promised her on her deathbed that I would finish the book that she was writing, which was a biography of the English historian Edward Gibbon. And that was a huge promise, and I kept it. But before she died, she didn't know that I would keep the promise, and it wasn't a payment of any sort. She left me the ring. It's a Bulgari ring. It's a thick gold Bulgari snake ring with ruby eyes. I'm sure that's the most expensive thing in my wardrobe, and I wear it every day, and I just didn't wear it today. It's in the safe at the hotel. I brought it with me.
Oh, it's in the hotel, yeah. So you take it to...
So that's 2.
And the last one?
I don't have expensive handbags. I don't have, I can only wear old lady shoes, travel bag. I have that wasn't that expensive because I have a beautiful Marni leather coat with cropped sleeves and, very minimalist. And the Rei Kawakubo stuff also, it's not that expensive because I bought it either at a discount when I was doing the story or I got it online. But I have a wonderful Rei Kawakubo dress that no, I bought that retail. That's very up there too. So Prada, Rei Kawakubo, and Bulgari are the 3.
Wonderful stories, thank you. I would love to ask you a few questions about your creative process, about your writing secrets. When do you write the best? What is the best time of the day? I don't know. And what do you do when you have some block? Do you have a fear of empty page?
Well, okay. First of all, when you're on deadline, you write pretty much blindly until you're done.
Definitely.
But and I could used to be able to work for 13 hours at a stretch. I cannot do that anymore. So I limit it to about 6 hours. And also, I used to love to work all night, and now I don't. I like to get up in the morning, and I'd say between 9 and 1 o'clock. That's probably my best time to work now. It changes with age, changes with your life, changes. When my son was I was a single mother, and when he was little, I would work from 12 to 5 because that's when I had the babysitter. So it changes over the course of a lifetime.
Where do the best ideas come? When you're at the writing desk or somewhere else, or just going through the city,
the best
just having a
ideas
meeting?
Okay, so what do I do to get over writer's block? I'm going to be honest, I take a tiny little dose of Ritalin for a week, no more than that ever. It's a stimulant, very tiny dose. It just focuses you, and then it sort of, it helps you deal with the anxiety about starting something, the anxiety of having no ideas, the anxiety of reading the crap that you pour out in the first days of trying to get something on paper. So it just helps deal with that. I don't, as I say, that's only to start things. And then you just have to keep on going, batting your head against the wall until you say something that means something. And then once you write a sentence that means something, that shows you the direction of the piece, you can follow that thread, to where it leads you. There's always something. Sometimes in the bathtub, sometimes I have to take hot baths to relax into that place where you're surprised by what you knew but didn't know you knew.
You're a brilliant and very experienced author, but have you ever experienced a fear of empty page in your life? Just
every single time I try to write something. The beginning of everything is nothing but that. The beginning, it's not even, so you start throwing words at the page and they're so ugly that they make you ill. And then you start losing your sense of reality. Inside of like vertigo. It's very hard. That's why some people don't have this. I mean, I have colleagues at the magazine. They have to turn in 8,000 words on Monday morning, and on Friday night they're out at a dinner party. I've never understood that. Writing comes easily to them. They're very confident. They know what they think. I never know what I think before I say it. I have to find it. So it's groping.
I have a wonderful quote from the New York Times profile on you. New York Times, yeah. She is not satisfied with a paragraph until it signs, said Henry Finder, one of your editors at the New Yorker. So can you tell more details about how do you edit yourself effectively? Because it's not simple for journalists, for writers, to edit yourself.
You have to, it's like tuning an instrument. You have to listen for what doesn't ring true. You're listening for the pure tone. And if it doesn't ring true, no matter how pretty it is, no matter how smart it seems, you get rid of it. And so it's very much like you tune the sentences. And this is a process, so it takes a while. They're sloppy, they're like that. And then you tighten the screws, you take out adjectives, you find the verbs that really express, that are precise, that express the action. It's a question of making things as airtight and precise as you can. And then when you're starting to get there and it's the vessel is holding water, it's much easier, and then it's sort of great. Then you can't tear me away from the computer, then I'm really happy.
Who is the person that you hadn't interviewed but love to?
Very good questions. Oh, now. It's also a question of who would talk to me. There's some people I'd like to interview, but they wouldn't talk. I mean, not because it's me, because they're very private, or they wouldn't talk.
Mm-hmm.
Who would I like to interview? I would actually love to have an interview with the woman soldier on the front here.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't go to the front, not because I'm afraid, I'm really sort of not. I'd be a nuisance. I'd be a danger. I'd put people's lives in danger, so I wouldn't do that. But I would love to talk to a woman soldier. I'd love to do a profile of a woman soldier. There was, our friends were telling us about a couple, and they have 4 children, and he has something to do with drones. She's joining the army. He's going to stay home and take care of the kids. That sounds like a really interesting story to me. And there are many women I'd just like to know about how they got to the front and what it's like for them. So,
why so passionate about women's stories?
Human stories?
Women's stories.
Women's stories.
Because
I'm of that generation. When I was born at the end of, I was basically born in 1947, the end of 1946. So my generation spans the old world when you were going to be a virgin until your wedding night, and you went to school. You couldn't wear trousers to school. You couldn't wear trousers at all, and you had to have your hair like that. And you never raised your hand because you didn't want the boys to think you were too smart. That's the world I was born into. And then suddenly, cataclysmic change, historical change, the 60s. So the subject of first of all, you become aware of the oppression. You become aware of how, and not just you, of course, but women, the history of women's history and how their voices have been silenced. So I think that's how I became a writer. And that's why the subject has always been very important to me. And it's not that men are interesting, but because the subject that I started writing about is still very important in this world.
Definitely.
When you think about, yes, there's enlightened places in which there are more women doctors than there are men doctors and women, but not most places. So it's still very urgent.
Going back to Ukraine, I know that you are planning to visit Kharkiv. Which stories you are going to investigate there? Do you have some?
I don't know. It'll be for when I come back, because I'm leaving on Sunday. We're not going to have time to go now. We were going to go. On last Saturday, and my dear friend had an accident, and we couldn't go. We would have been there Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and come back on Tuesday. And we were going to do events in Kharkiv. But then the other problem was, of course, that Kharkiv was blasted, and that events would have been dangerous for people to attend. And so I'm not sure that it would have worked out. But I wanted very much to see Kharkiv. I don't know. I have to think about it when I come back.
Before our conversation, we talk about safety.
Yeah.
What do you think about safety? Should we talk about this in our world when Russia is bombing Kyiv and the situated in the center of Europe?
My American friends all sign their texts, "Stay safe." It's like a tick. They can't help it. They can't not say that. So what does that even mean? I don't even know. I'm going to say, you don't want to say, it's not that. What you really need to be is stay safe enough, but not too safe. Because to be too safe in anything is to truly limit your exposure to the life and the suffering and the meaning and the vitality of what's going on. And here, you can't stay that safe. You know, every night there's something happening. You come here knowing that. And if you're going to get freaked out about it, don't come. Thank you very much. Stay safe. No, don't stay too safe is what I would say. Don't stay too safe. Don't risk other people's lives, but your own is yours to yours to risk.
I watched one of your latest interviews, and you told that for you it's very important to feel alive. So what is feel alive here in Ukraine for you?
You know, I feel very alive here in a way that I feel less alive at home. Because war does two things. It sharpens the will to live, and it, in a way, takes the edge off that self-obsessed individualism that exists in materialistic Western cultures. So it's your will to live is stronger. It's just stronger here. Your sense of the appreciation of being alive, because people are dying all around. And every night, when the bombs fall, they don't fall every night, but kind of every night, you sort of think about how precious the day was. And so that's another, in a way, selfish reason for coming, because you feel very alive here. And for example, last September, my son lives in Estonia, and so he was going to meet me in Poland. And we met for some reason in Krakow. And coming from Kiev to Krakow was kind of staggering, horrible, staggering. I mean, you going from this very alive city with practically no tourists, with no tchotchke, with no little souvenir stands, with no drunken Brits having, and you go to Disney World, this sort of Middle European 18th century Disney World that is Krakow, which is it's about commerce and branding and selling things, and it was very hard. It was strange. It was a very strange experience. It's nothing against. I actually loved Warsaw. It just happened to be that Krakow was such an example of materialist sort of Western, and of course the sense of the locals versus the tourists. And
yes,
it's the opposite of what you get. If you get to Kiev, people are so kind. They're so welcoming. They're appreciative. It's that it's the opposite.
You're comparing Kiev and Krakow, and what do you feel when you come back to New York?
Well, you can't.
Do you need some days?
You don't have the same dispassion. You don't have the same distance from the place that you live as you do from. I'd never been to Krakow, so I was seeing Krakow for the first time. I was seeing Kiev for the first time. They were both. But when you get back to New York, I don't know. I'll write you. I'll tell you how it feels this time. It's not going back to New York. It's going back to America right now. That's going to be. That's going to be tough. Because here you read the news, but you're not there. We'll be going back to the coup d'etat.
You're talking about Ukraine in such a beautiful and poetic way. So I think maybe you should write a book, not just in a profile stories for New York.
I wouldn't feel qualified. I think you have to speak the language of a place to do more than write superficially about it. Maybe you could do that in a profile of a person whom you get to know, but you get to know them through an interpreter. I wouldn't do a profile of a Ukrainian subject only with an interpreter, because I had to do that with Rei Kawakubo, but I had her clothes. She wasn't, it was like, you need, language is so important. The original is so important. There are just things that are lost in translation.
I think that we are going to the end of our conversation, and I would love you to give a few recommendations for our audience. Firstly, can you recommend, I don't know, a 3 book which we should read if we're gonna study how to tell good stories?
As journalism or as fiction? Fiction, I probably Joan Didion is a wonderful example in some ways.
Yes.
Her essays are great. Her fictions, don't bother with it. Joan Didion, the reporter, is a fantastic reporter. The same with Janet Malcolm. I think they're the two great. There were some earlier New Yorker women writers who were also fantastic, but
but we should read Joan Didion in English, because it's a pity we don't have Ukrainian translation.
In terms of essay writing, Susan Sontag's essays, and they are being translated by a wonderful woman named Yaroslava.
IST Publishing. And we have this brilliant biography written by Benjamin Moses, I think, of Susan Sontag. He got a Pulitzer for this book.
I have some problems with that biography, but there's another one coming out that I think will be better. But yes, Susan Sontag was another person who was a brilliant, vibrant, original essayist, and her fiction's just not as good. She didn't. It's not bad. She wrote one very good novel, but the other novels are not very good. So those three are my top picks for essayists. And everybody should try to read the poetry of Emily Dickinson. If your English is, even if your English, you can get the pith of Emily Dickinson because it's very gnomic. It's very tiny, short lines, and she of course was a 19th century American poet, a kind of recluse. I think she's one of the greatest writers.
Okay, that was recommendations what to read to tell the good stories. And can you share just a few names of the books that made the most powerful impression on you for the last, I don't know, half a year? Something new, not classical.
I'm only going to mention one because I have stacks of books. I don't watch television and I'm not on social media, so I read. There's a book you should all, I think it would mean something to all of you, by a Hungarian writer named Agota Christoph, who escaped from Hungary in '56 with her baby, and she walked, I don't know, she walked across the Alps or something like that, and she made it to Switzerland. And in leaving behind Hungary and the oppression and the fear and everything else, she left behind her native language and wrote in French. And she didn't write very much, but Agota Christoph is really worth writing. She's so powerful. She's something called The Notebook. There's something called The Proof. I don't know what their translations are. I don't know. But so if you can read French, you can read it in French. And if not, they're translated into English. She may be translated. She's an underknown writer who's fantastic. I love I've been reading the New York Review of Books Classics is a fantastic resource for
the top 100. Yeah.
Yes,
it's
just
brilliant
for books both. I think I'm a big fan of Elena Ferrante. Big fan of Elena Ferrante, and I think if you don't want to read the huge tetralogy, read the first 3 books of hers, the short ones.
Yeah, we have in Ukrainian.
But I read this. That sounds like I don't read male writers. I absolutely do. I'm not allowed to mention his name. I spent a lot of last winter reading Chekhov. But you forgive me for bringing that up, but I did. So
you said that
he was sort of Ukrainian, right? He was on the border, Chekhov.
You said that you are not social media person, but for journalists, social media is a tool.
That's why I don't write about fashion anymore. That's exactly why.
So you don't like the contemporary fashion? What do you mean?
No, it's not that I don't like it. It's that you cannot write about it without being on social media. And I don't want to be on social media, therefore I had to give up writing about fashion. And that was okay. I wrote enough about it.
So no text about fashion now, yeah?
No, it's no fashion. It's always interesting. There's always something interesting happening, but I wrote about fashion when there was a hierarchy, when it was still sort of there were designers who had great authority, who dictated what the look was going to be, and you looked to them constantly for guidance and for inspiration. And that's just not the world anymore. And without making judgments about whether it's better or worse, the energy comes from the street, the energy comes from crowdsourcing, it comes from TikTok, it comes from Instagram. And it's not that I disapprove or look down on any of that. I don't at all. I just don't want to do it. I just don't want to spend my days on the phone. I hate the phone.
Okay. Dear Judith, I would love to give our audience opportunity to talk to you. Дорогі друзі, ми маємо трошки часу. Якщо у вас є запитання, будь ласка, ставте їх для Джудіт.
Judith, first of all, thank you very much for being here in this uncertain time. It's a great honor. It's very challenging. You mentioned you are looking for your next piece here in Ukraine. And forgive me, it might sound a little bit harsh, but Was Ukraine on your list because of the war conflict? Because the war brought Ukraine to the war of knowledge, world map.
Right.
So Ukraine got on your list because of the war, or it was on your list before that?
I think what's happened is that it's like a spotlight. It's like it throws. It's true. People didn't think about Ukraine. Moldavia, Lithuania. It was sort of an undistinguishable mass of countries and kind of to the west, to the east of Paris. And so, yes, it's partly because of the war that people are very, very interested in Ukraine. And that's the, but as we were saying about journalism, there's a hook. People are interested in what's happening, what's important, and what's uncertain. They're interested in the story. And so this is a place that's generating a lot of stories.
Thank you.
As I understand, it was David Reef who proposed to you to visit Ukraine, yeah?
Yes. And he would have been here, but he had...
What did he tell you? Why should you visit Ukraine? What was his...
Well, no, it's not one thing. He talked about it so much. He loves it so much. He's been here since the beginning of the war, from, over and over and over again. He comes back all the time. And he's like a brother to me. And so, of course, anything that he was so interested in and felt so passionately about, I wanted to come. And he was being honored. He was made an honorary professor of Vogue. And he teaches, and so that's why I came initially. He was being inducted or whatever, sort of anointed, and that's how I came. But he knows so much about Ukrainian history. In fact, it's a problem in a funny way because David is so thorough. He knows names, places, history, this and that, and it shows me what you need to know anything. People come. Joan Didion, for example, one of her worst books. She went to El Salvador for a week. And so the serious journalists, war correspondents, friends of mine, they call that book The Week of Living Dangerously. So you have to be very careful. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be that person who writes about, the week of living dangerously. Oh my goodness, you were bombed in Kyiv. No, you have to know something. So I don't know anything. So that would be my task, is to know something.
Okay, are there any questions?
Judith, thank you very much for this conversation. I am an architect, and today I got a message from furniture manufacturing. For pretty girl, good prices.
Wait, come closer, because my ears are full of wax. I never got it rooted out.
I'm an architect.
You're an architect, I heard that, yes.
Yeah. And I got a message today from furniture manufacturing with next sense. For pretty girl, good prices for furniture. Do you have a brilliant answer or advice for me?
It's a brilliant question, yeah.
Wait, so you got a message. Wait, I didn't hear the whole question. You got a message with the...
Yeah, it was a sexism, yeah, it was a sexism. They're proposing some good furniture for good prices for pretty girls.
Right, that's, okay, the two parts of the question. Well, what's this job? What are they asking you to do?
Just to buy something.
Yeah.
To buy something?
But the promotion is awful, yeah.
If you can do it, send back the picture of an old crone or some very strange person and say, if you feature this person in your next ad campaign, you might interest me. Beauty, the tyranny of beauty, but that's a whole other subject. No, send back a funny picture, send back a freaky picture and say, that this is, I'd like to see more inclusivity in your advertising, but it has to be funny, it has to be kind of ironic.
So we can use humor as a tool for...
Humor is a very good tool for standing up to a point, up to that kind of, it's benighted. It's so old-fashioned. I mean, it's sort of pathetic.
But actually, it's not funny for me.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, sexism. Never goes away.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I still have a question. You said that actually you're not going to expensive shops now, you are going to thrift shops. And it was really interesting to hear this for the person who was writing about fashion all the time. And when did you get this change? What was the reason actually of this kind of changed attitude probably? That it's better to go to thrift shops and not
Always.
spend a lot of
I
time.
never, first of all, I could never afford, I mean, the older you get, sometimes you have more money. When I was a working journalist, I was a single mother, and I loved beautiful clothes. There was no way that I could buy them anywhere else. And also, I loved the hunt. I loved the hunt for them. I loved going to these thrift stores. My neighborhood in New York had a lot of them, charity shops. And you'd look through all of these crappy things and you'd find one beautiful, a treasure that had been overlooked. And for example, they have a pair of pants, not these, I got these in a resale store. And they were these jeans with a fabulous pattern, and they were $10. And I brought them home. They're very well cut. I don't understand this. I tried them on. And then I looked really closely, and they were Gaultier. They were Jean-Paul Gaultier, and you wouldn't have known. You had to look at the print, the tiny little figures in the print. There was his initials. So the challenge of that, and it was a way of, it was a kind of sport. It's always been a sport. And it was a way of resting from writing. It was, I would go around to the shops and look at find something, and you could satisfy the urge to buy something new for not too much money. So I've never, when I was very young and poor, that's how I shopped. When I was middle-aged and, on a reporter's salary, that's how I shopped. And now that I'm an old lady, that's still how I shop. But I have one of everything in my closet, so I don't need to shop anymore.
Thank you.
Do you have more questions?
As a writer, surely you have your own collection of articles or essays that never made it to print. And what do you do then? Are they just your collection that you look back, or are you looking for a moment actually to release?
No, there's all kinds of stuff in the drawers. There's all kinds of stuff that's been printed that's never been collected. It's I've been writing since for so long that I've forgotten things that I've written that are. I don't care. When I die, it's someone else's problem. I really don't care.
Are there any questions?
No, so I just want to say something about Ukrainian Vogue.
Thank you.
It was very impressive. I was looking at it. Of course, I can't read Ukrainian, but you
can read this book because it's
you get a
bilingual,
sense.
yeah.
So women's magazines in the 60s in America and in England and in Italy and in France, they were doing what you're doing.
Yes, definitely.
They had huge culture sections. They commissioned fantastically talented writers, men and women, to write really serious short stories or essays or this or that. They promoted culture. And when I got this invitation, and I realized that that's what you're doing here, that's what Daria is doing. And I was really impressed by it because that went by the wayside. In the Insta, TikTok culture, it's long pieces by the fashion magazines are also dying now because of social media and because of the internet. No one's going to wait 3 months to. So, but they were really pro-woman. They were proto-feminist in their way. Yes, they had girdle ads and this and that, and everybody was emaciated. But they also really did important cultural promotion, cultural support. So it's still alive in Ukraine. That's still what you're doing.
We should do, yeah, definitely we should
Very
do.
important.
Thank you for this feedback, but I will be waiting for your feedback on this text when you read it.
I will. I'll write to you when have you seen this? Everybody's seen this.
Dear Judith, thank you very much for this
Thank you,
brilliant and
Daria.
very open conversation.
Дякую. That's my second.
And thank you for being here in Ukraine. Have a safe trip to
I'm very
New
moved by
York
the
and
thanks.
come back, please.
Thank
Come
you.
back.
I'll be back.
We have so much stories to be told
I'll
here.
be back, and I'll know another 50 words when I come back. I'm going to learn the alphabet. When I first got here, I was wandering up near the opera, the hotel that I mentioned near the opera. Why are there so many antique stores here? It was apotheke. But if you don't know the alphabet, it's it looks like A-N-T-E-K. I thought, so many antique stores. So you have to learn the alphabet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daria. Thank you
Дякую
for
вам,
being
дорогі
here.
друзі.